We are pleased to be able to join forces with the Governor's Commission on Minority Affairs to present this webinar this morning. Many of you may have sat in on the training program or session that was held yesterday afternoon, and we wanted to give people one more opportunity to watch someone actually go through the information that needs to be completed for this grant application. In case you still have questions. But know that the Small Business Development Centers, we have people all over the state. We're very happy to try to help you walk through this step by step to make sure that you can get your applications in prior to the deadline, which is 11:59 p.m. on Sunday evening. So I am very pleased to be able to introduce to you this morning Dr. Dolores DaCosta, who is the director of the Commission on Minority Affairs. We're going to start the session this morning with her giving an introduction to the program and talking about the eligibility requirements for this program. We'll give a few minutes after each session to ask questions, and then we'll allow some time at the very end for additional questions. So with that, Dr. DaCosta, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Well, we're in the last 3 days, maybe, of this application. The small business grant that the state has allocated will be given out over the next month or so. The process that we've been trying to get moving included building an application that captures as much information as possible to reduce the time that the panel will need to make final decisions. I'm on the panel along with the Director of Revenue, and we have a director from Commerce. The three of us will be given these applications once they've been vetted and everything checks out, and we will make the final decision on the amount and who will get approved for the grant. It is our hope that everyone who applies will be able to get some funds. With this program, it was really designed to help those who did not get any funds from the first wave of PPP monies that came from the federal government. And that's exactly how this process is set up. We're looking at the first phase will be 15 or fewer employees of businesses that did not receive any funding. And the second phase will be 25 or less employees who have expenses that they would like to get reimbursed for. Some of the things that we're going to be looking at as to make you an eligible candidate for this is, first, you have to have a tax ID number for your business. Your business has to be located in the state of South Carolina. We have a list of documentations you can use for identity. We're accepting just about any government issued ID, driver's license, passport. We have folks who are working here on who have businesses here, either on green cards or what have you, and we're allowed to obtain a business in South Carolina. If you have that documentation and a certificate showing that you are operating in South Carolina, you're good to apply for this grant. That's why we're asking for certificates of existence, and it needs to be dated at least by September 13th of last year. That is the floor that they're looking at to determine whether or not you're in business 6 months prior to the governor's order, which went into effect March 13th, that shut everything down. Now, whenever you're dealing with completing the application and you're determining the amount of money you'd like to be, or expenses you'd like to be reimbursed for, keep in mind that you're looking at the expenses from shutting down, as well as the reduction in your revenue through the end of December. So some months on the worksheet, you will be estimating. That helps us to determine how much money we need to give you, even though it's capped at 25,000, how much money we need to give you through the end of, to help you through the end of the year. The worksheet is really a guide. My recommendation would be for you to include your big items, your rent, your lease, your utilities, big items where you lost most of your revenue. If you do not have anything of that sort, then of course, you're going to have to show the invoice that you want to be reimbursed for. Now, I know there's been some confusion about when to include receipts and when not to. As a business owner, you determine whether receipts will give you more or whether those big ticket items will give you more. And you can either include both, or you can just include your major revenue loss in order to be reimbursed. That's about all the eligibility. I don't think that there's anything else that I left out other than the amount of money between $2,500 and $25,000. So it's better for me to answer questions that folks may have so that, you know, I can sort of guide them along the way.
So if anyone has a question, you can put it in the chat box. Sarah, is that the best way for them to do this?
Yes.
Okay.
And keep in mind that these expenses must be COVID related. You have to tie it into the virus or the impact the virus had on your business. Now, some folks will say, well, I didn't have any money the fourth quarter, because they're asking on the form for certain tax documents, fourth quarter preferably. And some people will say that I did not have any money fourth quarter. You're going to have to use something to show that that business has made money. And the only way you can do that is to show previous revenue that the business has made, or show revenue that the business made in January and February. Because as a panel, we need to know that you have generated income somehow. And I know that it has been said that you can't use your tax papers or expenses prior to September 13th. But if you don't have any revenue at the fourth quarter of last year, the only thing you can do is to include something previously. We need something to measure, something to look at in order to come up with the best or the highest amount of money we can give you.
I think one of the important points here to remember that there's been quite a bit of confusion about is that when you're filling out the worksheet and the application, there is this cap of 25,000. If you get to 25,000, either in revenue loss or in expenses, you can complete one or the other of those categories. You don't have to do both.
That's correct. You have a choice. You could do one or the other. That is correct. And I think a lot of folks are thinking they have to do all of it. I would do what's going to give me the most.
Absolutely. So Sarah, I think we have some questions in the chat box.
So on the last page of the agreement, there's a place for a signature from the state of South Carolina.
Just ignore that.
Okay.
That part is the state state admin will take care of that. And no signatures need to be notarized. Nothing needs to be notarized coming through the portal.
And where do we get the worksheet? we can use income from last quarter of last year. Yes, Dr. DaCosta did say that. Do you want to explain to them where to find the worksheet?
The worksheets, if you go to Accelerate SC webpage and go to the CARES Act, open that drop-down menu, you will see a list of items, and there will be a worksheet in Excel, and I believe one worksheet's in Word or PDF, editable PDF. And you can actually, if you need to, print it, handwrite it, and then go back and fill it in online, because everything still has to be submitted electronically.
And then to reconfirm, if we have a big loss in revenue, we do not need to submit any expenditure amounts, and hence no documentation on expenses.
It depends. If you have the large ticket items, for example, like I said before, you lost revenue because your business was completely shut down and you own a restaurant. What is the biggest loss you have from that? That's what you want to include in that worksheet, not what you paid for. You want to put it under one big umbrella to show that major loss because you had no customers coming in. That's a major loss. It's going to be hard to try and itemize those kinds of losses. So go with the big picture.
Right. So to reiterate and confirm, yes, if you can show loss of revenue of $25,000 or more, you do not have to fill out the expenditure section and worry about doing invoices invoices and receipts.
Right.
And Bernita has put in the link to get the worksheet along with the other documentation that you need.
Now, if you're a small business, like a barbershop, and you know you don't have $25,000 in loss, and you have $1,500 for PPE, like you had to put in the plexiglass or whatever, that would be worth submitting both your loss as well as the receipt for those things you had to purchase. But if you're in a restaurant and your loss comes from your customers, your biggest loss is that you were shut down. No customers could come into your restaurant, and you can show on your last quarter that the restaurant made $10,000 or whatever. And knowing that the restaurant was shut down for the month of March, April, May, that is all lost to your business because you generated nothing.
And when we go through the actual forms, we'll show you how to fill things out. And the important thing when you get to that, you'll see is that you need to make sure you put something in each field or
Right.
the worksheet won't be complete. And we'll show you how to do that when we get there. Dr. DaCosta, another question here is for revenue loss, can we use our monthly South Carolina DOR reports we submit for sales tax as
Yes.
to be submitted?
Yes. Mr. Powell, who's the director of revenue, said that if a participant submits something and we need proof of their business revenue or whatever, he would be more than happy to have his staff pull it if they don't have it. So if you can go to that web page and print it in advance and upload it, that would definitely be something we would use.
And one more question, if a non-minority business has received fairly substantial PPP and EIDL loans or grants, should they bother applying?
When you say non-minority, what does that mean?
Small business, just not a minority business.
Now we're including, if you go by the definition of SBA, that's all women, small businesses, doesn't matter what race. And then you have your ethnic minority. That's why I needed to ask that.
Okay.
Because we're including all small businesses that were impacted, small minority businesses who were impacted. And that means minority based on the federal definition.
Yeah,
Now,
I think the question is, if they got some other assistance, should they bother applying for this?
it depends on how much they lost first and how much they got from PPP. If they got a small amount from PPP, we're telling folks to go ahead and apply, because what we would do is if they can show a new amount of money, you can't submit the same thing that you did for the first wave, because that's going to be cross-checked. And if they find that you received dollars, for example, you received $10,000 in PPP and you did not include it on this application, it's going to kick you out, because it's going to say that you did not disclose all of your information. It's better to disclose it by saying, I did receive $10,000 in a small business loan, but I have another $15,000 worth of expenses. You will put the $15,000 of expenses into this application to help you.
Right, so obviously the smaller businesses with 15 employees or less, the minority businesses that did not get any other assistance will get priority.
Right.
But if a company has had that, is a qualified 25 employees or less business, and they've had substantial loss over and above what they got help on
Right.
From PPP and EIDL, I would suggest that they go ahead and apply.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it looks like our numbers are not going to be as high as we thought it would be. So therefore, we will have room to help other businesses out as well. And we will try to make up the difference. If you submitted 50,000, we know our cap is 25,000. You received 10,000 in PPP. We will try our best to get you the 15,000 to make up the 25.
Exactly. So we've gone through about all the questions that are up right now. So why don't we transition to the next section? And of course, if folks on the line have more questions that you want to ask, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and we'll have an opportunity at the end to come back and catch up. So next, what we're going to do is walk you through the worksheet that has to be completed and uploaded to go in with your application. And I believe that Ben Smith is going to be covering that for us. So I'll turn it over to Ben, who is one of our managers who's located up in the Clemson Center. So Ben.
Thank you, Michelle. We really appreciate your leadership and your leadership as well, Dr. DaCosta, and your fellow Governor's Task Force members. And thanks to all of our teammates statewide, and especially our fellow panelists here with us. I'm going to share my screen, and I think I'm going to be, let's see. I'm going to start with the blank version of the worksheet. You guys, Michelle, can you confirm that you're seeing the worksheet on the screen now? Thank you. I would say, again, per Bernita's designation in the chat, you've got the specific link. It'll bring you to pull up the information that you would need. The worksheet for the grant is one of those tools. I would caution you, there's a separate grant initiative that all the information, and it's stacked below the information for this particular grant that's allocated to the for-profit small businesses. Be mindful to deal with all that support information, including the worksheet tool link that we're looking at now that you come to first. Just make sure you're on point with the right one. The second thing, before you begin to fill out the worksheet, you would want to just go down to the bottom of the worksheet and double check that you've got the most current version. In the bottom left, you're seeing it, my cursor, version current as of October 19th is very important. There was a previous version. You don't want to be submitting that. That could cause a delay on this. So what I would suggest, go ahead and pull up the worksheet from the link, Accelerate SC link. Now, for you guys that aren't familiar with working in Excel, when you pull this worksheet up, you're going to get a yellow or canary yellow banner across the top. It's going to ask you if you trust the source, and if you do, you can enable edit. You definitely want to enable edit. You can't do anything else in Excel unless you do that. We've had a lot of calls about that. People just get jammed from the start. Go ahead, enable edit. The other thing for you guys that aren't really familiar with working in Excel, after you enable edit, I would suggest go up to the top left. You'll see the file prompt, and you'll just go ahead and do file. You'll do save as, and then you'll pick where you want to save it. What I would say is you can name it as your file, and you'll want to go ahead and make that happen as you begin working, instead of waiting to the end, would be my suggestion. Now, about the worksheet, just starting and working from top to bottom, pay attention to the color code. You'll see the color code, the worksheet key here on the top right corner. All the salmon colored, or pink if you would, cells, you'll notice those require inputs. So if it's asking for something, you have to put something in. If you had no revenues, for example, or no qualified expenses for that period, but it's in a salmon colored box, and we'll see that here shortly, you must put something, so put 0. It's as simple as that, okay? So you want to do that. The other thing that I'm going to point out as you're working through is you'll see the yellow codes of the sections really for each section. And those give you little cheat sheets. So that's your little notes. So you really don't need anything yet. And we'll speak to that here shortly, because I'm going to walk you through one of these that I prepared as a sample. So you can use those as a little cheat sheet. It's relevant to what they're asking for in that particular section. So as you complete each section, you'll just look at the right side, and it's going to ask you, when you feel like it's completed, go ahead and check that it's completed. If it's not, it will let you know, and then it'll actually highlight what you left out. Go ahead and take care of that, and then check off each section as you work through. I'm going to show you a completed sample, so I'll come back to these here in just a second. I'm going to point out, though, just a general overview of this particular worksheet tool. You'll see in section 3, there's a darker, bolder coloring for the October and November for 2020. Why is that, Ben? Those will be estimated. Those will be projected, because you haven't fulfilled that full time period at the point of time this was issued. So you may have good data for October now, but obviously November would still be a projection estimate. Okay. So the other thing I'm going to point out, again, you're dealing with salmon colored cells. The others will be auto computed. That's the whole point. For you guys that aren't familiar with Excel, that's why we're working on this. It makes the math really easy, because it's going to take care of that. As you get to the bottom, and you'll see on your completed sample that I prepared for us as part of our walkthrough, that each section here is still red, because we haven't completed that yet. As we complete it, those would present in green for you, and you'll see that in just a second. And then all the numbers that you're going to need for the application that my colleague Earl will walk us through here shortly is all consolidated nicely in the bottom right corner. So you don't have to really fret about where am I getting that from on the worksheet. You're going to go specifically as specified by the application in section 3 of the application. You'll be able to pick it up from line item as specified, and you'll have the number here for you. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing this one, and then I'm going to share the version that I have completed for us to look at. Okay, now, Michelle, can you confirm that you're seeing the completed version? Thank you. So as we were saying, okay, we walked through the blank, that's what you're going to see. And you started by saving it as a file that would identify you and your company along with this particular file would probably be a good idea. And you're good to go. Now, I just went through and filled this out. So you'll see the required salmon color cells. When you complete it, they turn to green automatically. So I know I've got that. Hey, Ben, what is this? What is this little corner mark here? Well, that's a little heads up. So when you come to that, it says, hey, you want to show your business name as shown on your tax records. Oh, that's a great thing to know. That's why they made this little point here that you were addressing. So pull up your tax records, put it in exactly as it says. And when I say exactly, I would err in abundance of caution to avoid any delay on your behalf because cash is king, as you guys know in small business. If it has a comma, as my example, the Benjamin Group, comma, space LLC, I would put it exactly as it presents officially, would be my suggestion. Your business name, you need to go in, your primary contact name, and then your contact email, all would be required fields. Again, when you complete this, go to the box on the right for that section, and then you'll check that it's complete. Had I had something incomplete, it would have flashed in red and told me you're not through yet. You need to go back and it'll actually isolate. You just put in the missing information and then check the box. So with that said, moving forward to section 2.
Hey, Ben.
Yes, ma'am.
Just one comment, just, you talked about the boxes in the beginning on the uncompleted form being pink. Now you notice when it's completed, they've turned blue or green, whatever the color is.
Absolutely. And that's a great heads up. It just kind of catches your attention. And this, they tried to bend proof this thing. So if I miss something and I'm colorblind here and I still don't see that, hey, it's standing out like a sore thumb, you missed one, it's still not gonna let me complete the section because it's gonna tell me it's incomplete when I try to check off my checkbox in the right corner. So again, they've tried to bend proof this thing as much as possible, and it's a great tool. Just make sure, again, you're starting with the October 16th version. The other version has a snafu, and you definitely don't want to get jammed up with that, okay? So thank you, Michelle. That's a great point with the color coding, and it adjusts automatically. And as you move down, so in my example, this is other aid received. In this case, I received $10,000 of an EIDL loan. And I went ahead and folded that in here. I did not receive any PPP loan, and I received no other, like our local Greenville CARES Act funding grant. And I think we've got some in some other MSAs around South Carolina. Didn't really receive anything else in my situation. So I went ahead and put zeros in those other spaces. If not, they would have stayed salmon colored and it would not have computed. So I had zeros here, 10,000 here, 0, 0, 0. And guess what? It automatically did the math. And so then I checked off on the right corner, this is complete. If you're not exactly sure what they're asking, again, go to the section 2 and pull that up. It's going to give you a little cheat. See if I can move I'm seeing y'all smiling faces, which is great, but it's right in my sight line here. So yeah, you can just go over here and you can say, hey, what does this mean? And it's going to refer you to what you need. Now at this point, if the built-in section cheat sheet notes at the right margin doesn't clarify enough, where do I go first? Well, for your convenience, instead of having to connect with somebody that's there committed to help you, but just for time's sake, if you go back again to that main link that my colleague Bernita put up for us in the chat, acceleratesc.gov, I think, but make sure that's correct, and go to CARES Act funding and then the SCARES Act, just in time for Halloween, mind you, our SCARES Act acronym, it's going to have an FAQ built in as a support. I would say, go ahead and pull that thing up. Your first line of answering, untangling a question regarding ambiguity would be your self built-in section help notes. The second line I strongly suggest is go to that FAQ And if that doesn't unravel it, then proceed with the teammates throughout the state that are geared up to assist you. And that includes Dr. DeCostas and a lot of their teammates, as well as our teammates here with our SCSBDC. So
Ben,
yes, ma'am.
could you address whether unemployment or the individual stimulus checks that have been issued would have to be noted in that section, or maybe Dr. DeCosta?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great question. And on the unemployment side, if you're sole proprietor, then that would be the case. But only if you're a sole proprietor. How would I know if it applies? Well, and let me make a caveat. In my judgment, in my opinion, if you're a sole proprietor or a single member LLC, the key is those two business classifications would require you to use a Schedule C as your business return that transfers bottom line profit loss from the business onto your personal 1040. That's your key. If you use a Schedule C, then you do need to report that you received, because that was CARES Act funding that helped, that flowed through our state to provide that unemployment. Typically, self-employed folks would not be eligible for state unemployment benefits. So that's why it would apply to you, but that's the only situation. If you have 10 W-2 employees and they received unemployment, that's not what that's asking for. Okay, so that's a great question. And so let's make sure we're on point with that. Okay, the other thing I would point out about aid received that may be a little bit that we've had some questions is the business interruption insurance payments. What is that? Well, if you didn't have it, you probably don't need to put anything but a zero, but this is what it is. You could have business interruption insurance and it may have covered the COVID incident. That's the key. And if it did, you may have received payments from your insurance coverage on business interruption triggered by the COVID pandemic issue. If you did, then you would want to report those benefits in this place. That is not the payments you are paying to your insurance company to have the coverage. Okay, don't confuse that. And some folks got a little mixed up on that. Don't confuse that. In addition, during this COVID pandemic crisis, we've had multiple SBA disasters that are not COVID related. Most of those were triggered by previous tornadoes throughout the state and some other flash flood incidents and some agricultural droughts. Make sure that it's the COVID payment pandemic only you're reporting. If not, you're costing yourself monies that you would have otherwise been eligible for. Okay, so that's really the section 2. This is all the aid that you've received so far. And now we're getting into the fun part. I know for all of my fellow colleagues and Dr. DeCosta, and this is, so now we're getting into the revenues. Well, you know, let's think about it this way. We've got a full year 2019. Honestly, from a revenue standpoint, it would have been business as usual. So you're going to get that off of one of the qualifying specified sources. For most small businesses, you're going to be able to pull that up from your chart of accounts, your books, whether it be you know, something that's a digital software driven, like QuickBooks or what have you. You may outsource to a bookkeeper, but you'll be able to lay your hands on that. If not, you'll go to your tax records, but you'll be able to lay your hands on that likely. And again, you'll just want to go ahead and reflect in column A what those revenues for specified from March through November for 2019. In my example, they were relatively smooth revenues. I don't have seasonal flow. I don't have economic cycles that are driven by special events in my area based on my business model, what have you. And I just went ahead and smoothed those out. They're $25,000 each month. And then in 2020, for my business, I was really business as usual in this example, but whoa, all of a sudden I couldn't even open due to COVID. And I had zero revenues for May and June. And then when I could reopen, hey, I wasn't open at full speed, and or the consumption, the demand's not at full speed. So I had way less revenues, less than half that I usually track here in July. We stabilized that with some tactics, doing some things online a little differently. And so I pulled that up, and I've kind of hit my wall. Last August, September, I'm 15,000 and I kind of hit a wall. So my projections for October, November then would follow my current momentum, because there's no seasonality to my model. There's no business cycle that impacts my model in normal times. That's why they want to see 19 to the left and 20 to the right. 19 should reflect normal times for you. And then you would be comparing the 2020 such that you can get a good judgment call on the difference, which would be the revenues that COVID impact cost you as a business. And that's really what we're wanting, and that's what they're wanting. And so that's really what we're set up to help you with. Now, again, here's a little sticks out like a sore thumb, red corner, use projected. Okay. And so we went over that. But again, when you see one, even if you think you know what they mean and you don't, but just put your cursor there just to make sure. And so you're going to fill out these. Now you noticed, hey, Ben, you put numbers in for column A all the way through November, and column B. And where did the other numbers come from? Again, that's the beauty of Excel. This is auto-generated. It's been double-checked. This version's accurate. It accurately reflects what the grant issuers want reported. So it's just a tool, and nothing to be intimidated about. Just work the tool, follow it. And then if you need notes, again, I'm going to slide some smiling faces to the side. You can just jump in and say, okay, what does this mean? Okay, here's some notes. If that's not enough clarity, pull up your FAQs. That's probably going to clear it. If not, just call Michelle. I'll put her cell number here in the box. No, I'm just joking. You've got, and they'll share with you how to connect with your closest options for assistance. And that would include all my teammates here, in addition to Dolores and her teammates on the task force and beyond. So again, we finished that revenue estimate box. We're going to check the box. It's done. Okay. Section 4, qualifying expenses. Now, again, just get in your mind and understanding, Dr. DaCosta went over again what qualified expenses would be. And you've got, again, your little cheat sheet here that's going to give you some clarity as well. And you can drop your cursor, and it's actually going to give you even more detailed about certain categories. So think about it this way. This was due to some impact. It was during a COVID interruption period. It might not have been that you were shut down the whole month. Like in my sample, we were shut down for 2 whole months. Then we were reopened, but we're still not at 100% speed here. Okay, and it's reflected in the revenues. So in my judgment, we had no related issues the first 2 months in my example, because I was rocking and rolling business as usual right here. Now, in your situation, in reality, you may have had impact as early as March. And if you do, you'll reflect that. But in my situation, COVID didn't rear its head and impact me until May. So this is where I start reporting my staffing cost. Okay, for those respective months. What are staffing costs been? Okay, glad you asked. Here's our little helper. We come to staffing costs. There's your red Q, payroll and associated benefits, temporary and part-time and full-time labor costs would be included. So you'll go ahead and put that in. What if I'm a sole proprietor, Ben, or a single member LLC? Again, I report my income through Schedule C. If that's the case, you're not including your draws here. That's the key, right? You're not including it here. Why? Because it reflects in your net revenues, in your net income. Okay, so you won't be left out. It's just captured in a different spot. It would have been captured up actually in section 3. Okay, so that's just a little point of clarification. So if you work through these, the one thing I would point out about this section, they went ahead and broke these what could be qualified costs into 4 different categories. The prompts are there and the notes to the right to help you understand what goes where. and just go ahead and fill those out. Again, if you had zero impact for that category, you got to put something in a required sales to part zero. The one thing that's a little different here, this is direct cost for personal protection equipment. That's something that you normally wouldn't see as a business, but due to COVID, you may had to purchase some things. And it's giving you some examples here: protective or sanitation supplies and equipment, installation of protective barriers, which was a great example that Dr. DaCosta went over earlier, could be a piece of that. Mask, gloves for your staff, teammate, customers, those disposable paper straws might have been. So there's a lot of things that could apply. And again, in my example, I had no PPE expenses until I actually got into the month of June. And then I really had some in July because I was gearing up for a reopening. Okay, I was shut down, I was gearing up, and there were some things I had to do to make sure I was comfortable to reopen. So I really had some PPE costs. And now look, now it's mostly things that are stabilized. And so on my projections, I don't foresee any major expenses, but I don't see this stopping anytime soon. So I'm projecting based on the current momentum of $500 a month is my PP. That's sanitation, gloves, some other types of, we're a restaurant. I normally have flatware, but during this, I'm using disposable enclosed utensils. So these are things that aren't norm for me, but that's going to go on until further notice. So I'm projecting that. Okay, and that's why, again, October and November are separate together here, because those 2 months are the ones that are projected. Again, I'm finished. I checked the box. And if I didn't check it, you'll see it stays red. I'm finished. I checked. Now I'm green. I'm good to go. Look, this section 5, everything's calculated. You didn't have to do anything here. Now let's park a cursor here. It's going to actually give you the hand way of doing this if you're interested, which reminds me, if for some reason you don't have Excel software or access to it, at the acceleratesc.gov site, you'll see a helpful tool that this particular worksheet is in PDF form and it's fillable. So you can actually fill this out by hand, and then you can upload it. If you do that, you're going to have to do the math, but you see it's got the instructions that would walk you through the computations. And again, we'll be happy to assist you as a double check on that, or if you run into a snag. Now, in summary, I'm sorry?
Before you go to the last section, if you go
Yes,
back
ma'am.
there and just explain the total request and how that's worked there.
Sure.
Big numbers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So from the previous sections of the worksheet, it pulled down my revenue loss. So I'll take you back. Where did it get that from, Ben? Well, right up here in section 3, monthly gross revenues, we completed columns A and B. Column C was automatically generated, and it said, basically, this incident has cost me $104,000 in revenue loss. Okay, that's from the COVID incident, right? So it brings that amount down automatically. You don't have to worry about that. It would bring that down, I'm sorry, to reflect the revenue loss. Qualifying expenses, same thing. It pulled our subtotal from our previous. And they just happened to actually, I didn't realize, Michelle, what's the odds of those things actually? And I'm sorry, I would have never did that as an example. That could be very confusing. But you see, that was coincidental, guys. It's if you're saying, hey, mine aren't equal, it probably shouldn't be. This is a fluke of numbers, but it's one of those things. So section 4, qualified expenses, everything's automatically generated once we completed in full the required fields, and it's going to pull it automatically from you. But see, the total was 104, and it pulled it right in for you. So now it's just going to it walks through the math. It adds those automatically. And then where did it get the 10,000 in other aid? Well, remember, we reported that. We reported that in section 2. It did the total, and it's going to back it out here. Now, that brings a point of clarification. If you say, hey, Ben, I had an idle loan or a PPP that covered payroll for certain months. So I probably shouldn't include that in its qualified expenses because it said it didn't want to double dip, right? That's wrong. Show it all. Show what you had that's qualified because it's going to back other aid received out here. If you don't include it in qualified, you're dinging yourself twice for it, okay? The way the worksheet works, right? So that's a point that you really need to just be on point with, make sure you're in good shape. So it does the math. Now, you say, Ben, okay, this incident has cost me so far, and I'm projecting through the end of November, coming down the stretch of this particular period, $198,000. Yes, it has. My total request is only 25. What's up with that? Again, as Dr. DaCosta went through, the grant cap is 25,000 per small business entity registered and situated here in South Carolina. So that's the max, and it's going to cap me out. Had my total came to less than 25,000, it would have been that amount on the nose. Okay, and that's what it's going to provide for you. So as we go through now, look, all I'm doing in section 6, I'm putting my name, I put my title as aligned with my business entity. I'm going to date it, and I'm going to just glance to the left. Each section is now green. I don't have to do anything. It says I'm good to go. Everything's complete. I save it again. Just hit my save prompt. And look, everything I need is all summarized, bottom right corner, per line item. And everything is, it has the description to the right. And this is what you're going to need to carry. This is the only place you'll need to look now to carry over numbers into the official application. And then my colleague Earl will cover that per Michelle's prompt here shortly, but that's my walkthrough of the worksheet. And, you know, hope maybe you got some clarity and value from just kind of seeing the worksheet and looking at the tool. And again, it's just a tool. And we've got folks that could do this stuff in their sleep because we work with them all the time. So it's not a big deal. And we all started from somewhere. You know, it's, you know, it was, you know, it may have been a little odd to me the first time I worked with Excel. So don't be bashful. If you need guidance, reach out. It's an honor to be of service to our small business folks. I can say that. You guys make our communities what they are. And we're really honored to be of service to you. So with that said, I'll yield the floor to Michelle, and she'll take it from there. Thank you.
So we're going to take a few minutes and just cover a few more questions. So where does someone show if they received unemployment under their business?
Okay, if you received unemployment, and that would be, again, that's only if you file a Schedule C, and that would be unemployment that came to you personally, not that of any of your work staff. Okay, let's be clear about that. And if that's the case, you're reporting really all aid received would be here in section 2. And then you're going to look at the most applicable place. It's not PPP, that's Paycheck Protection Loan Program. It's not part of the EIDL loan. Okay, other federal COVID grant funding could be other local grant. It's not a local grant. Business interruption payment, it's not. So by default, in my opinion, it would fall here as other federal COVID grant funding, because part of that CARES Act funding is what paid the FPUC, and that's really what allowed you guys as a self-employed person to be eligible for unemployment. So it would go in other federal COVID grant funding.
Okay, so then the next related question is, if someone also worked a separate job for another employer and got unemployment for that job, not for their business, would they have to show that too, since it's not related to?
So as I understand the question, they own a small business, but they were not approved and did not receive unemployment as a small business person. They, however, had a job of record for a separate business entity. They were employee there. They applied for unemployment as an employee of another business. Would you need to report that? That's not other federal COVID grant funding that came to you. In my opinion, the answer is no. You would not report that in that question, per that question.
Okay. Next question, if 2019 taxes are still being prepared, but we have a Schedule C for 2019, would that be sufficient for the 2019 revenue requirement documentation?
It would be, and you know, Schedule C is an annualized view, and so it would be. And if you don't really have access, timely access, given the perishability of the grant, and we're, you know, the deadline is approaching, I would just take the Schedule C and I would just go ahead and divide the total by 12 months, and then I would put the monthly average in the way I did my example here. Okay, and that's really kind of the scenario I set up in my mind. That reflects the reality of a lot of small businesses, because a lot of the companies that actually outsource bookkeeping services for those that don't have it, that are not tending to this in-house, are probably slammed right now, because they probably take care of a lot of the small businesses in their market. And so, again, not to wait around. So I would do the monthly average, and that's exactly the Schedule C is one of the qualifying acceptable per Dr. Costa that would back you up. Yes.
Okay. So we have a question from April, and April, I'm not sure that I'm understanding the question. It says, so C is auto.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so if I'm understanding April, then in this section, section 3, column C is automatically generated, and that's a great point. You won't manipulate that. If it doesn't reflect what you thought, then you need to check what you inserted in column A and column B, because you see the formula that they're using for column C is simply the amount in A minus B, and that auto generates for you. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Great point.
Okay. And then we have someone who's having trouble when they're saving their worksheet, the total at the bottom of the page won't save the total. Is that normal?
That is not normal. That should not happen. So what I would do in troubleshooting, first thing is I would make sure you just look at the bottom left and make sure you got the current version worksheet of October 19th, 2020. And I'd start there. And really what I would probably do is say what you got, you know, because you got the inputs, it might save you. But if I were you, I would pull up a fresh worksheet and do the inputs. Something's gone astray. And I assume I did not try to manipulate the auto sum cells. I assume they are cell protected, but you got something that may have been garbled in your worksheet. Okay, so I'd check the version. I'd check here in section 6 just to make sure everything is complete. And if those are the first two low-hanging fruit. And then if that didn't clear it up, I'd start with a fresh worksheet, because that is not normal. That should not, I haven't heard of that with everybody I've talked to so far in almost 2 weeks. Very unusual. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's always possible when you have sheets like this that something gets messed up with the formulas and you may have to go start over again. And also, folks, some of our panelists are answering some of your questions in the chat box. So, you know, be looking at that if you've asked questions there. We are going to make this recording available sometime later today, and it will be on our website. And we'll make sure that we tell you that at the end and also put it in the chat box. Another question is, for the unemployment, do they include just the federal $600 portion, or do they include everything, all of it, the state portion as well?
Well, now that's a graduate student question. That's highly evolved, but there's a fairly simple answer. There are actually two pieces that are part of the unemployment for the self-employed that were funded through CARES Act money that would apply to the grant in this particular section. And it is the $600 a week kicker that everybody nationwide that qualify for unemployment, regardless of what you were doing, got. That's a piece of that. And then that piece that funded the state trust fund, unemployment trust fund, to allow the self-employed to receive unemployment who otherwise would have never gotten unemployment. So the answer is all that is in that piece that allowed each state to extend unemployment for for a prolonged period of time. All that was federal. And if you're unemployed and you receive that, if you're self-employed and you receive that, then that, in my opinion, needs to be added. It needs to be reported as other federal COVID grant funding, correct?
And then there's also a question about the stimulus checks that have been issued to individuals depending on your income level. And
Yes.
that I don't believe is required to be reported.
That's
being
correct.
Provided to individuals, does not relate to the
correct.
business.
Absolutely, because that would never be reported on your Schedule C.
Okay, so with that, why don't we move on to the next section? Earl is going to present the application and show you how to fill that out. And he'll also talk about uploading documents, which has been a big sticking point for a lot of people. We'll try to catch up to questions again after Earl's section. So Earl.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thanks, Ben, for that comprehensive look at the worksheet. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now at this point. So if you have made it through this point and you've completed the worksheet, congratulations, you have survived probably the most labor-intensive part of the process. What I'm going to go through here really is taking that information as well as answering some additional questions and actually making application for the grant. So just real quick, if you haven't started the process yet, you're going to start at this website, the Accelerate SC website. How you get there really doesn't matter. There's the website URL there at the top, whether it's through the SBDC website links or wherever, just so you end up at this page here. That's where you will begin the journey of the actual application. You should have at this point gotten at least this far, because this is where you would have downloaded the worksheet that Ben just went through. And you're primarily concerned with this area right here, this top area for the Minority and Small Business Relief Grant Program. The application and there's a video. It's actually a very good video on how to fill out the application is included there. There's also some of the tools that Ben mentioned, the FAQ, the frequently asked questions. Really encourage you to consult that document if you're not able to answer a question with the application or the worksheet. This is kept up to date. Our team monitors this FAQ. It is updated by the state and those who are working with clients on a regular basis, so we can get that information out if you're unable to reach somebody immediately on the phone. So make sure you check that out for sure. And then of course, there's the Excel spreadsheet, and there's also the PDF version of the worksheet included down here that Ben mentioned. And I will say, if at all possible, please use the Excel spreadsheet. Do not use the PDF just because it's there. You will be much more pleased with the process if you do the worksheet rather than the PDF. So this is where you start, and then from there you'll click and go to registration, and that will bring you to this screen. If this is your first time to apply, make sure that you fill the information out properly, and please do remember the email that you use for not only the email that you want information and correspondence to come back and forth from, but also the username, which must be in the form of an email address. They can be the same email address. Make sure that that is included and you write that down somewhere so that you have it. And of course, remember the password as well when you set this up. If this is the second or third time that you're coming in, you need to come back to update something, In that event, you will not register. You will scroll down to the bottom. You will say you already have an account, and that will then open up a blue login box. And that is where you'll put your user ID in the form of the email that we just talked about, your password, and then click login. If you have,
Honest.
I'm sorry?
Okay, you're good now. We lost a little bit there. You froze for a minute.
Oh, okay, sorry. Hurricane. So if you've reached this point and you've logged in, the next place that you will arrive will be this screen. It is the State House screen, as I refer to it. And one thing that you need to for sure take note of before you jump down here and just jump into the application, take note of the links that we have here. The documentation that you are going to be asked for within the application, many of those documents are right here. So if you are asked for the electronic payment enrollment form, it is right here. You download that, fill it out, scan it, and attach that. Same way with the grant agreement. Make sure that you read that in its entirety. I think it's maybe 6 pages. It tells you exactly how to administer the funds once you receive them and all of that good stuff. So if you have any questions regarding the administration of the grant and how that's going to work, it's in that document. And then for the sake of our conversation, the minority and small business relief eligibility amount calculation form, that's basically the form that Ben went over. So you probably already have that completed at this point. So really, it's just the electronic payment enrollment form and the grant agreement that we're talking about that you should be downloading at this point and completing. So do that. And as Ben said, save the spreadsheet to a spot on your desktop or a folder that you can keep all this documentation in. That way it's easy for you to find when it comes time to upload the documents. So the next thing that you'll do is you will click on the Minority and Small Business Relief Program, and that will take you to the application form that you would need to fill out. If you are returning and need to update, you will simply click up here at Application, and your application will be listed right here that you've already started, and you would click on that number. If at any time you need to return to the home page to maybe get back to these documents, you simply click Home. That will bring you back here, and then of course you can go back to your application. So by clicking on the application, we get the actual steps involved with the application. Now, when you pull this up the first time, all of these boxes that you see here will be blue. The reason mine are green is this is a document that I use to help clients through the process. So I keep one that is already filled out, and it is green because we have processed the information already. But your first time will be blue. The next time you return, any section that you have completed will be green. Any section that is yet to be completed will be blue. So make sure that you are checking that. Another thing I want to point out, because sometimes it gets overlooked, if you scroll down here is the area in which you will upload any files that you are asked for. And I will go through that process here in just a moment. But if you're wondering, where do I put these files they're asking me for? It is on the application page just below all of the steps. All right, so that said, we'll go into the application, and for the most part, all of these are pretty self-explanatory. I will stop on some of the ones that we've had questions on. Otherwise, I will assume that most of these we can answer, things like name, address, phone number, and the like. But here's where you will put in your business ID, your tax ID number, social security number. If you do not have a tax ID number, it's basically giving you some alternatives there. DUNS number, notice it does not have a red asterisk. Anything with a red asterisk is required. DUNS number does not have a red asterisk, so you do not have to have that. For those of you who do have it and would like to include it, you can get that and put that in there as well. And you can work with an SBDC consultant if you're not quite sure what that is and would like to track one down. We can help you obtain that. As I said, name, address, and phone number of the business. And then if your business is located in one location, but you receive your mail in a different location, you would also include a remittance address. We're hoping that all payments are received electronically, but in the event that a check would have to be mailed or other documentation needs to be exchanged, it would be good to have your mailing address if it's different from the business address. So we save that section. At the end of each section we will save. We should get some form of a acknowledgement that it's successful and move on to the next, and so on. This is where we would put in all ownership information. If you are a single member LLC, sole proprietor, one person show, basically, you will put your information into the boxes, selecting the proper gender and percentage of ownership. In that case would be 100%, and so on. If you have more than one owner, one owner that owns 20% or more of a business, in this example, you notice I have an owner down here at 80%. We would want to add the second owner and the appropriate information for them as well, and round out that 100%. And then we would add that owner. At that point, we would have two owners, both of them adding up to a total of 100%, okay? In the event that you have entered something wrong, or maybe you inadvertently put someone in who maybe has 2% ownership or something like that, that's not required, you can simply check the box and delete that owner, and that will correct any of those issues. Finish out the form by answering the other few questions regarding the type of business that you have, an explanation of what you're doing with the business and the like, and then press on from there. Save that section. All right, so the funding and eligibility section. This is a carry over from the worksheet that Ben was just working on. So you'll come in and you'll answer the questions accordingly, based on what the status of your business is and the number of employees and the like that you have. If you were closed, then you want to put some form of explanation. Use this box to expand on any details that you feel might explain maybe something that doesn't come across in just the numbers on the worksheet. You notice I have a very brief answer here, but if I had a unique situation on my worksheet that maybe doesn't come out directly in the numbers, this is a great box to put that explanation in, so that when the reviewers get it, they're not left guessing as to why this doesn't quite match up the way it typically would. So use this box to expand on that a bit. Anytime you see the word explain, please do so. That is your opportunity to get your point across and tell your story about why things are the way they are. So at this point, then we get into pulling over some of the numbers from the worksheet, and you will notice that it says enter value from calculation worksheet. So you're not left to figure this out on your own. You've already done it. You pull those numbers across accordingly. And basically at that point, everything should be complete for this section. I have had clients that have passed this application off to an accountant who went out there and came up with their own numbers and did their own calculations and filled in numbers, and that was not required. Just follow the worksheet. It must match up. So you're going to have to attach that worksheet, and that's one thing the reviewers are going to check. Does the application match the math on the worksheet? So please follow the worksheet. So notice when I click save, I get an error. This is a particular area that I get questions on. I notice I put a 0 for the number of employees, W-2 issued employees. Well, I'm a sole member LLC. I don't have an LLC. I don't have an employee. So I put 0. Well, in this particular case, you're going to have to put a 1 to clear that box. Okay. And then you can save that out and you should be fine. Just keep in mind that that might also be something that you want to mention in one of those explain boxes, just to be sure. Now on number 4, additional aid. Again, this is coming from the spreadsheet for the most part. You're going to answer questions that basically ask about what kind of aid that you have received, how much, and then you, again, you get to explain the type. So if you are putting in your unemployment and you're still not quite sure, maybe on the fence about that, whether it should be or shouldn't be, these are good places for you to make explanation on things like that. All right, so now we're at attachments and acknowledgements. This is where you need to have those documents that I pointed out prior to on that State House screen. You will acknowledge the fact that you have those documents available for upload. You will also have to include a W-9. If in the event you do not have a W-9 available, you can go to irs.gov. In the search box, type in W-9. You will get the form with instructions on how to complete it, and then you can attach that document as well. Copies of driver's license, various other documents that at this point you should have already come to the conclusion that you already need. And then we get into some of the documentation for qualifying expenditures. Many of those questions have been answered at the beginning of the presentation today, so we'll take additional questions afterwards. But just understand that at this point, this is where you'll check the box saying, yes, I'm going to attach those documents required to account for all expenditures that I'm going to be using. The grant agreement, again, was another one of those documents, as well as the electronic payment enrollment form and the spreadsheet. Those are all those documents that we mentioned on the website entry, as well as on the State House page. So you'll check that, saying that all of those are available for upload. You will also read through the agreements and signatures, make sure you understand the terms of applying for the grant, the disclosures that are required, the agreements that are required by you as a recipient of the grant should you be awarded funds. That's all outlined here. And then you will place your signature, not your initials as I did. Put your signature in that box. It will automatically date that as well. And then of course, save it. Now, before we hit submit, we have to make sure that we have all of the documents that we outlined under this attached and acknowledgement. So if you didn't before and you're not quite sure what you need, just make yourself a short little list on a notebook, pad or paper or whatever is needed. And then jump out here and take that list and add the files. So we come down here and we say add files. And we're going to upload those files. And I've created a folder that I keep all my SC Cares documentation in. And I'm going to select the file that I want, click open, and it will upload that file. So now you see that this is uploaded. In the event that I need to delete the file, I have uploaded something erroneously, or as Ben pointed out, maybe I have the old worksheet and I would need to replace it with the new worksheet. I can simply click the file, come up here to this down pointing arrow and click delete. It's going to say, are you sure? Absolutely. And now that file is no longer listed. You can also rename the file if that's required for some reason, and you can add any number of files. So don't think that you have to have all of your things scanned into one document. You can add numerous documents. Just make sure they're named properly so the reviewers can get through them quickly. If you just name them numbers and letters that they can't tell what it is, that's going to slow things down. So put good names on those files. And the other thing I will note is if after clicking submit, what happens when you click submit after attaching your files and filling out the application, you're going to get an email that acknowledges the fact that your application has been submitted. And then all of this information that you've just put in will no longer be accessible for you to change. It will be available for you to view. So once it's submitted, I can come back in, I can see it, but I won't be able to change it. And the files that I have submitted will be listed. The one thing that you can do after you've submitted is you can add additional files. So if you need to update the spreadsheet, if you've come across an additional piece of information that is supporting an expenditure, you can come back in and add that information to that application. So after you submitted, again, if you need to access that application at some point in the future, you'll log back in, you'll get to this screen, you'll click application, you'll find your application here, click, and now you will be able to access that again. So I believe that's all the information required to fill out the application. I will pass it back to Michelle and we'll take questions at this point.
Okay, thank you, Earl. That was actually the clearest that I've been on the application since we started. So one of the questions, and I'm just kind of going back and trying to catch up on some as well. So to clarify, if someone made a mistake in the actual application itself, not the documents that were attached, but in the application, how do they go about getting that corrected?
Right now, the only way that you can get access back to these sections, any of these in the green boxes here, the only way you can regain access to those after submission is to contact the helpline and have them open it back up for you. There is no way for you to get back into those as an individual.
That's right.
So you have to go back to the help center, call or email and request that they unlock it and send it back so you can update it.
Correct.
Okay, and so we have a question. If I had to stop work for myself for the last month and find a job to work for another company to make ends meet, how does that affect me getting this grant?
So the period of time that you're speaking of, which is much more recent than the time frame that's covered under the application in the worksheet, can be separated out. You can still apply for the period leading up to the point at which you went back to employment. So I would just fill out the application with the information that pertains to the period that led up to the point that you started employment, and submit the application with just that information.
Right.
Okay. From Stephanie, I just tried logging onto the site. My password is not working and the forgot password link is not working. It's been this way for an hour now. Is there a help desk number to call? And we've given her the call center number. Is there any other advice you would give her?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's about the only way to go about it. I've had a couple clients with that situation. One yesterday was able to get through the process with the help desk in fairly short order. My understanding is they are reprioritizing those types of requests because they realize that's on their end anyway, that's a pretty easy fix and they can get through it. So hopefully if you make a call in, they'll be able to turn that for you pretty quick.
Okay, several people have asked if they have to upload a voided check.
I don't think so.
If you have absolutely nothing else and you are down to bringing in every little expense and that's the only thing you have to prove, I'd say go ahead, but That's not the level of detail we're hoping you have to get to submit this application. As we said earlier, you know, you want to start with the big things, use the loss of revenue, then think large expenses, your payroll, your rent, and so on. Those are very easy for you to add to the mix. If you're down to where you're trying to dig up receipts for boxes of paper and cartons of straws, that's that can get tedious. And yes, you will need receipts for stuff like that, but hopefully you can get to where you need to be with the larger expenses.
Right.
Okay. Dr. DaCosta, you can probably field this one. What is citizenship required? And again, what do they need to do to show that?
Citizenship is required, but we're also accepting other government issued ID that says that you are eligible to have a business in South Carolina. And a lot of folks are using their documentation from immigration or whatever. If they have a legitimate business that's registered with the state and they have paid taxes to South Carolina Revenue, they are considered an eligible business. We're accepting all those legal documents.
Thank you. We have another question. If you own a business that is operated by employees and you operate a second business day to day, can you qualify for the grant for both businesses?
You can file two separate applications. You can't combine them. It'll be two separate applications because you should have two separate EIN numbers. But if you're operating two under one EIN number, then you can only claim one.
And the maximum would still be 25,000 across the two in that case.
Yes, exactly.
And someone noted in the chat box that the ACH form does request a voided check, and that's for the electronic deposit, I'm assuming, of the grant funds into somebody's bank account.
Right. Because there will be, they will not mail checks. Everything has to be done electronically. So if they're asking for a voided check, then you're going to have to include a voided check to make sure you get paid.
Great. I believe I've caught all of the questions so far in the chat box. Does anybody else have any other questions that you'd like to ask any of our panelists? And I apologize for Ben. He is up in the northwestern part of the state where they've been getting hit pretty hard from the remnants of the hurricane, and he's lost his Wi-Fi connection. So he's, I think, no longer with us, but we've still got a whole group of panelists here that can help answer questions. So,
well, Michelle, while you're waiting for folks to add more questions, I just have to say that your group, your team is one of the best I've seen at this. And really, that training yesterday should have been done by you all, because you take your time walking people through the little things that most folks would overlook. And had we had this training on the 19th or the 20th, I think we would have been farther along the road. So you all, fabulous work. I can't wait to do some future work with you, because we are going to have to be proactive in helping small, struggling businesses get to that level of resilience. And the only way they can do that is to learn the process correctly on how to manage a business, how to manage finances, keep records. So CMA is going to look forward to working closely with you all in the future, because we're going to remedy this issue once and for all.
absolutely. Well, thank you. And you know, that's what we do day in and day out. And I want the attendees on this call to understand that the Small Business Development Centers, we've been here for 41 years. Our whole mission is to help small businesses get started, grow, and be successful. And we provide business consulting. We're kind of like an extension of your business. You know, we've got all those experts that would be represented by different departments in a big corporation. So we can come in and work with you on any issues you're facing right now due to the COVID pandemic and trying to be resilient, trying to get your business reestablished, look at marketing, look at your financials, you know, look at your operations. And our consulting services are all free of charge. We do not charge any fee. And we provide a lot of training programs right now, like this one, they're all online. And because we work with so many people throughout the state, we're a great conduit for you to help you get connected. If there are other resources that can be helpful, we will help you do that as well. So just know that we're very happy to be here and help everybody. I'm going to give some of that contact information here in a minute, but I just wanted to add one or two other questions that have been raised. Do we need to add the support we received from SBA to cover 6 loan repayment installments on SBA loans? And if so, where do we add that on the worksheet? If we don't know, we can check back with Department of Administration to try to get that answer. This was deferral of payments. In some cases, I think they were forgiven on some of the payments for.
Is this a part of COVID? It's still when SBA deferred payments till January for COVID. There would be nothing to report. It's just that in January, they're going to have to start making their payments again.
Right.
So I don't see, but we'll ask that question, but I don't see anything that needs to be added to this application.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That would be my impression because they're still having to pay it. They've just deferment.
Yeah, the information says funding received.
Right, so received.
You didn't receive the funding.
No, SBA is going to be calling you January.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. What are the tax filing forms needed to prove revenue loss in addition to tax returns? So for 2019, the only thing you need is your tax return or your Schedule C, the portion of your tax return that directly relates to your business revenue.
Right.
For 2020, you have a number of options, and I'll let Earl and Dr. DaCosta go through those. You don't have to do that whole list of documents that show. It's just enough to show the change in revenue. So those forms could be what?
And that could be the fourth quarter of 2019. They could show what revenues or what have you they raised in 2019. And 2020 is going to be really easy because that's, you know, you're comparing it to when the governor shut you down. So therefore, you're not going to have a tax return there. You may do a profit loss sheet or something to show to support that you did lose money, COVID related funds coming in.
Yeah, and I would add that, you know, that's one thing that throughout this entire pandemic, we have seen the PPP, the EIDL, now the SC CARES Act. Small businesses are challenged when it comes to keeping the books and keeping good, solid financial records. If you are having difficulty with that, if you see a challenge in that, come see us. Don't be embarrassed by that. Come see us. That's what we're here for. We're be happy to help you set up a set of books and learn what the P&L statement is and how to read a balance sheet and all that. That's what we're here for. So don't shy away. Come see us.
Absolutely.
And again, just one last clarification to Carol's questions. You can fill out either the revenue loss section or the expense section or both.
Right.
Depending on how much loss you have, remembering that what you're going to get back from this grant is capped at $25,000. So there's not a lot of value in going in and filling out a lot of additional information. You get up over 25,000 because you're not going to get more than that anyway. So don't make the job harder than it needs to be.
Right.
So again, if you would like more information from our organization, our website is very easy, and Sarah will put that up in the chat box again, but it's www.s like Sam, C like Charlie, S like Sam, B like boy, D like dog, C.com. www.scsbdc.com. When you go to our website, at the top right, you'll see a blue button that says sign up here for counseling. Unlike all of this, it's a very simple form, takes you less than 5 minutes. I promise you don't have to have any information with you. Everything that we do, all of our consulting is at no charge, and it's completely confidential. But this just allows us to get you in our system so we can stay in touch with you, provide you with updates as we're getting new information, and provide you with additional support as you move forward. There's also a locations tab at the top, and if you click on that, it will pull down a map. And as you scroll down below the map, it actually gives the contact information for each of our centers throughout the state. I strongly recommend that you start with email, since we're working primarily remotely and most of those numbers are office numbers. We are checking those, but probably the fastest response you're going to get is through our email. Please reach out. Don't hesitate to contact us. We're here to help you. We've got through Sunday at 11:59 p.m. to get this in, and we want to make sure that we help as many people as possible make that happen. So Dr. DaCosta, again, thank you so much for being part of this and working with us on this. Again, this is being recorded, and it will be posted on our website at www.scsbdc.com today. You'll see right at the top is a banner for COVID. And if you click on there, it'll take you to where all the recordings and everything are. So again, thank you for your time today. I hope this was helpful for everybody. And we look forward to seeing a lot of small businesses in the state get some relief from this grant. Have a great day.
Thank you.